My support. Thank you.
I call the honourable member Christopher Hipkins.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. That's what my mother called me. Normally when I'd been very poorly behaved. Mr. Speaker, I do have to say, I do have to disagree with something Chris Auchinvoll said when he said he was delighted to speak on this, the third reading of this bill. I don't feel quite the same level of joy, because it'd be fair to say that there aren't a huge number of MPs queuing up to speak on this particular topic, because there is a fair degree of public cynicism, I think, when it comes to MPs talking about their own pay and rations, if you like. And I think potentially, if you look at the situation historically, often with some good reason, I think the public would look on us debating these matters and talking about how hard we work and how we need this and how we need that with a degree of cynicism. And I think if you look back over the history of this debate, sometimes that's actually been fair and justified. I think that that's absolutely right. And I think that over time, MPs have, if you like, responded to the public pressure and public criticism of those matters, and have put in place steps to ensure that there is a degree of independence in how many of these issues are decided. Our salaries, we don't vote on our own salaries, contrary to, I think, what many in the public would think. We don't determine our own salaries. We actually get very little say in how much we get paid. I do want to say, however, I love being a Member of Parliament. I feel incredibly privileged to have the honour of being a Member of Parliament. I certainly don't think that I am poorly recompensed for being a Member of Parliament, and all I ask for is that we're given the tools we need to do the job that we're put here to do by the voters of New Zealand, and we are able to do that job effectively. I don't expect to be rich or get rich by being a Member of Parliament, but nor do I want to see a situation evolve where you have to be rich in order to become a Member of Parliament as well. I think it's very, very important that in this, the House of Representatives, that we do have a genuinely representative Parliament. And I think if we sort of erode a lot of the support that's available to Members of Parliament to the extent that many in the public would like to see that happen, we will create a situation where somebody needs to be independently wealthy and able to support themselves before they can actually function effectively as a Member of Parliament and a representative of the people. And I would hate to see the Parliament become that way. So, I don't expect to become hugely wealthy by being an MP, but nor do I think that I should have to go out and become wealthy before I can come here and represent the people who elect me. So. There have been some really important, I think, aspects to this debate that I don't want to overlook. Metiria Ture is here, and I'm sure she's going to be speaking after me. And one of the points that Metiria Ture raised in the debate in the committee stages earlier in the week was the need to distinguish between what is of personal benefit to Members of Parliament and what is a work-related expense. In principle, I want to say that I absolutely do agree with that. The reality, though, is it's quite difficult in many instances to determine that, and particularly when it comes to travel. So on the issues of accommodation, on the issues of salary, where there is personal benefit, that's been removed from parliamentarians' hands and given to a remuneration authority, which is independent, and I think that's the right thing to do. The issue of travel is very difficult because Members of Parliament travel not just to and from Parliament, but to and from their homes to other parts of the country for work-related reasons, and it is sometimes difficult to distinguish what is work-related travel and what is personal travel. For example, and I'll give just a nice easy one, a Member of Parliament from Auckland flies to Wellington each week to be here as a parliamentarian and to be in the House. From time to time, Members of Parliament will need to go home during the week. For family-related reasons. Is that personal travel or is that work-related travel? They are here for work, but they have to return home for personal reasons. How would we classify that? If someone is at the other end of the country, say in Dunedin, on work-related business, and then they might have a gap of a day where they go back home and then they return back to Dunedin 2 days later to do some other work-related thing. Is that work-related travel or is that personal travel? They're returning back home to their home for personal reasons. It's sometimes very difficult to distinguish between what is work-related and what is personal when it comes to travel. I'm not saying on many other things, it's very easy to distinguish. When it comes to our salaries, that's a personal benefit. That's what we get paid back in order to do the jobs that we do. Well, it's earning. We're earning it, but there's an element of personal benefit in earning money. I don't think anyone would disagree with that. And so I think that it's fair that that be determined independently of us. But I think on the case of travel, that can be quite difficult. The other thing about travel is I agree with transparency insofar as costs the MPs' travel costs are concerned, but I think we need to be careful about the extent to which we take that. I think that the transparency we have around travel now has already changed behaviour probably to what it was before I became an MP. I've only been an MP for 5 years, but I think prior to that MPs could have free, unfettered travel anywhere around the country. There was no transparency and accountability around that. Now the total amount that MPs spend on travel each year is disclosed, and I think that that's probably the appropriate level for disclosure. If we got into the situation where every individual flight or every individual taxi fare had to be disclosed, we would quickly find ourselves in the position where members of parliament would become less accessible to the public, because every individual visit that a member of parliament did would have to be justified, publicly, one at a time, and so people would stop doing things because they didn't want to disclose the individual details of all of the things that they were doing, and I think that would be unfortunate. So I think the disclosure level we've got now, we're disclosing how much is spent on travel, I think that is the appropriate level, and it does encourage members of parliament to be as efficient as possible in making their travel arrangements. So I think that I think we've got that balance about right. And the other thing that I also want to make clear is the safeguards that have been built into this legislation for the taxpayer. If any of the things that take place under this bill do amount to a personal benefit to members of parliament, then the Remuneration Authority must take that into consideration in determining the member of parliament's salaries. So basically what it says is if parliamentarians appropriate themselves something that has a personal benefit, then the Remuneration Authority will take that personal benefit into account and offset that basically against the salary. So the salary will be deducted accordingly. So it's a safeguard to stop, I'm sure it wouldn't happen in this parliament, but any future parliaments basically awarding themselves some personal benefit in addition to their salary because it will be offset against their salary. And I think that's a good safeguard for the taxpayer to know that, that they're going to basically, there are protections in place to stop that sort of thing from happening. There are a few things, I think, in this bill which are welcome and overdue, and normally, I guess in any other place would just be dealt with by an employer, but here, because of the unusual employment relationships we do have to have legislation. The AWOL clause, as I refer to it, has been mentioned several times, members of parliament being absent without leave for a period of time. There have been very few provisions that have been able to discourage that behaviour and penalise that behaviour, and this bill deals with that. I mentioned in the committee stages of this debate my solution to that, which is, I believe, speaking as a former whip, that some form of microchipping or ankle bracelets would be an appropriate monitoring mechanism to ensure that members of parliament were doing. Electrified ankle bracelets would be even better. To incentivise the appropriate behaviour by members of parliament, but that, I haven't yet had widespread support for that idea from my colleagues, unfortunately. I also believe that in the cases where members of parliament are suspended from the House, that their salary should be docked. I want to be clear, though, that doesn't mean they get turfed out of the chamber for naughty behaviour and they go back to their offices and continue working. Suspension from the parliament means they are named. And being named means that there has to be a vote in the House. So it happens rarely, but I think it's important that when it happens, there is some consequence for that, because it encourages MPs to lift their behaviour and to avoid getting named by the Speaker. And now there is provision in this legislation to ensure that their salaries will be deducted accordingly if they find themselves in that position. So for the final clause that I want to mention, which I think is long overdue, is the ability now in this legislation to cancel the travel entitlements for travel and other entitlements for former members of parliament under certain circumstances. I think there is a lot of public disquiet about the fact that former members of parliament actually get travel entitlements once they cease being members of parliament. But again, I want to make it clear, that's changed. The world has changed. That only relates to an ever-diminishing group of members of parliament. Anyone who came in after, I think it was about 1996, doesn't qualify for that anymore. We don't have the gold-plated superannuation scheme that they used to have anymore. A lot of those things have gone now. There is a lot more transparency about it, and I think that that's a welcome thing. So this bill is a step in the right direction. I think we will continue to evolve, I think, to increase the level of transparency and accountability that members of parliament have around these matters, and I think that that's a very positive thing.
I call the honourable member